Rush are a band that are superlatively puffed by their supporters, yet conversely dismissed by those that prefer to view progressive rock through a lens moulded by a purely European perspective. Nevertheless, I thoroughly enjoy this band with their complex music and intelligent themes drawn from literature and philosophy, and these, I believe, are their 10 best songs. Number 10 is Emotion Detector from the Power Windows album from 1985. I see this as a candid exploration of human emotion, and many of the song's lines seem to parody, if not parody, perhaps reference at least, those saccharine love songs that populate the charts. This is kind of the prog equivalent to the Shakespeare Sonnet 130. Lee sings in this, trust is just as rare as devotion, and the chorus speaks of disillusionment, beautifully accompanied by the music. You get Lifeson's razor-like rhythm guitar cuts, which is kind of bleeds all over this and is emblematic of the theme of the number, as well as being influenced by some of the more new wave bands, I guess. I absolutely adore the line in this song that it's true that love can change us, but never quite enough. It reminds me a little bit of that line in Good Will Hunting delivered by Robin Williams when he says the issue is not whether somebody's perfect, but whether you're perfect together. Or, as this number might suggest, as perfect as you can be. Emotion Detector has never been performed live, I believe. There's some real Rush aficionados out there that might be able to correct me on that if I'm wrong, but I don't think this one has been ever dusted off. And I love the instrumentation on this Lifeson's metallic arpeggiated chords, which begins this one. It's very much 1980s Rush, really, AOR pop, unusual time signatures, and roomy production. But a fantastic number nonetheless. Number 9 is The Garden from Clockwork Angels from 2012. A pastoral delight, and this song has a real valedictory feel to it, made even more poignant, of course, by Neil Peart's passing shortly thereafter. Time passing renders everything meaningless to a certain extent. Time's infinite jest. Even mountains crumble to the sea. What I like about this one is structurally it's so important to the album. It's like a breath of fresh air to a record that feels quite dense, I think, in my opinion. And this comes at the end, it feels like an exhalation. I love the image of the watchmaker. It's a well-thoroughed motif in literature and philosophy. I think there's even a steampunk comic called The Watchmaker. And the watchmaker is an interesting analogy made in theology for the argument for design. This is such a beautiful and ornate number. Number 8 is Animate from Counterparts from 1993. Originally conceived as duality, it explores the psychological ideas of Carl Jung that posited that each of us have a masculine and feminine subconscious, the animus and anima respectively. This is an idea that's been battered around by the ancient Greek philosophers as well, certainly Aristotle and Plato in his Symposium, I believe. But I think Peart is also referencing Tom Robbins' book, Skinny Legs and All, which is about the idea of reversed sexual roles. I must admit, I love Counterparts. I love the sound on this album. And this song is a beautiful, warm bass part and fantastic melody. This is, in my opinion, classic Rush. I think Geddy Lee said it's one of the best songs we've ever done. Animate opens with a counting from Neil Peart, and the clash from his Ludwig kit is certainly welcome here, especially when accompanied by the percussive rhythm and thrum of Geddy Lee's bass. Although Animate seems to be about two people, I believe it's generally about how we respond to our feminine subconscious. Interestingly, the midsection is inspired by the tribal drumming that Neil Peart heard on his travels in Africa. Number 7 is Entre Nous from Permanent Waves from 1980. Do forgive my French pronunciation. This is a wonderful song from a wonderful album, drawn, I think, inspired by Ayn Rand's 1943 novel Fountainhead. The title, of course, is French for Between Us, and was a phrase widely used in Ayn Rand's work. This is another song in Neil Peart's arsenal about making connections. This was the third and final single from Rush's Permanent Waves album, and it's a real shift in direction. It's a tightly contained arrangement that skillfully places the vocal melody to the fore, supported and embellished by the other instrumentation. This is arguably one of their poppiest numbers at this point. Rush were just emerging from that deep, dark forest of prog obfuscation with their previous albums, and many see this number, and this album in fact, as pointing in the direction they would take in the 1980s. And the theme makes for compelling listening. The idea that even in our closest relationships, differences remain. Each person's life is a novel that no one else has read. You could say it's a song that celebrates individuality. I love the instrumentation on this one, from Neil Peart's drum flurry at the start to Lifeson's creation of atmosphere and texture and that beautiful arpeggiated guitar. Notice the use of acoustic guitar during the chorus, which is warm and detailed, and very much a testimony to the musical nous of this band. Number 6 is Time Stands Still from Hold Your Fire 1987. Time Stands Still was the lead single from this album, and it's a beautiful number. That's if you can get past the disturbing experience of that promo video, which just hasn't aged well. I think Geddy Lee said that it was a bizarre day, my hair was at its worst. But the floaty, anarchic quality of it, I think, communicates that sense of helplessness and restlessness. This song is full tilt existential terror, with everything slipping away. And if everything is slipping away, then time is meaningless, time's infinite jest, perhaps. And the lyrical refrain sung by Amy Mann is absolutely beautiful, especially when juxtaposed with Geddy Lee's vocals. They did approach other female singers as well for this song. I think one of them was Cyndi Lauper, but was unavailable. And I love the way that this song references the song that precedes it, Force 10. For example, the line in this song, "I turn my back to the wind to catch my breath," reminds us of the tempest alluded to in the previous song, as well as the line, "I let my skin get too thin," reminding us of the line from the previous one, "Skin as thick as thieves." And like all Rush songs, the instrumentation is absolutely fabulous. I love the way that the atmosphere is created with Neil Peart's use of wooden blocks and high-pitched toms, carefully placed around the melody to suggest the ticking of clocks or time passing. It's a beautiful number that laments our inability to recapture what we've missed, but also a plea appeals for us to enjoy the moment, even if it's slipping away. Number 5 is Cygnus X-1 Book One from the Farewell to Kings album from 1977. The whole thing is about balance, of course, which becomes quite explicit by the time we move to the Hemispheres album. The two sides of the brain, the balance between the heart and mind, the battle between, I think, Apollo and Dionysus. But it's an odd number on a medieval-themed album, a song that blasts us across the void of space and eventually into the black hole. The number starts with a cryptic passage read by Terry Brown, if I'm not mistaken, but its structure, like most Rush numbers, is pretty impressive. The song's lengthy introduction gradually introduces a syncopated solo bass line, which subtly changes the time signature with every repeat. There's just never a dull moment with this band. I think this song is about an overreacher, and the Icarus myth is evoked here. Interestingly, of course, the ship is named after Don Quixote's horse, and the idea of tilting at windmills is certainly alluded to, I think. At the end, of course, the protagonist's ship is ultimately destroyed, accompanied by Geddy Lee's shrieks. The sound and fury drowns my heart, every nerve is torn apart. And the number concludes with these mysterious chords that help us to segue into the next part of this number, which appeared on the Hemispheres album. I really like the faint heartbeat at the end, which suggests he's alive, and the story is to be continued, where Apollo and Dionysus will battle it out. Number 4 is Distant Early Warning from Grace Under Pressure. This number starts with a rumble of synthetic noise before surrendering to the electronic drums, firmly rooting this in the 1980s. Geddy Lee's formerly aggressive bass sound, I think, sounds far more restrained here, as well as the guitars are soaked in reverb, giving it that Ghost in the Machine vibe. But the instrumentation beautifully serves the icy tone of this record, with its bleak, dystopian atmosphere. At the time that this was written, we were at the height of the Cold War, and the fear and paranoia was very much reflected in this number. This album, in fact, with its frosty tones and sense of unease. In this song he sings of acid rain, ill wind and heavy water, very much couching it in the vernacular of dread. Unlike Peart's previous lyrics, the content is not abstract but palpable, and a skillful evocation of anxious anticipation. The lyrics discuss a loss of connection on both a personal level and a geopolitical level. I love the way that the personal fear of losing a relationship is conflated with nuclear devastation. With its heavy use of keyboards, electronic drums and sequences, as I said, this song is firmly rooted in the 1980s. But nevertheless, it still toys with some quite complex textural and atmospheric arrangements. Number 3 is 2112 from 1976. The atonal whirl of synthesizers opens this one. It's a perfect introduction for this futuristic dystopian slice of astral prog metal. Written by Neil Peart and very much inspired by the writings of Ayn Rand, it's a thrilling listen as Geddy Lee and Neil Peart perform these frantic frills around the huge cosmic yop that is Lifeson's guitar. It's an ambitious and epic number that continues on in the vein of Caress of Steel, despite the band fearing that their label were going to drop them. There is a clear progression in this number from the previous record. The lyrics flow, the story has an arc, and the vocals express the lyrics brilliantly. And the music is thematic and flows well together with the lyrics and concept. They fit tonally and melodically and kind of reinforce each other. I think with this one we can certainly hear the influence of the British prog rock movement. The overture draws to a close with a line from Matthew chapter 5 verse 5, "The Beatitudes and the meek shall inherit the earth." Quite ironic given the power struggle that goes on within this piece, but then I suspect that's the point, isn't it? Number 2 is Witch Hunt from Moving Pictures from 1981. Zelda Fitzgerald famously said that youth doesn't need friends, it just needs crowds. Witch Hunt, subtitled Part 3 of Fear, is the first part of the Fear series in which Neil Peart explores that idea that the fundamental drive in human nature is in fact fear. And this of course is the fear of the other and how this feeds into the mob mentality. George Carlin famously said, "Never underestimate the power of stupid people in large numbers." And quite pertinent today as public discourse is increasingly dominated by torch-bearing tyrannical types. One of the most effective lines in the song is this idea of limiting freedom of expression. The line is, "Those who know what's best for us must rise and save us from ourselves." Sounds worryingly pertinent to the world we live in today. The dark images, of course, conjured by the lyrics are accompanied by an impressively brooding musical score. And the ranting of the furious mob can be heard at the beginning of the track, while ominous keyboards gradually fade in. It's a doom-laden number, and Lifeson's guitars are more stormy and foreboding than announce themselves in any other way. For me, the excitement of this number comes from the layers of textures and the almost perfect link between the atmosphere created and the combined with the music and lyrics. Number 1 is Subdivisions from Cygnus, 1982, I think this came out. In many respects, I see this almost as an ode to otherness, very much about the need to conform or be cast out. Stylistically, this is very much Rush, adapting or responding to the topography of the musical landscape at the time. It's certainly an alienating album. There are Rush fans to this day that say they don't like it, but for me it's one of my favourite records. Structurally, I think the song is fascinating the way it's built around that incessant thrum and beat, suggesting perhaps the uninspiring uniformity of the suburbs that the lyrics later go on to describe, of course. And if we were to discuss metaphorical instrumentation, some have said the furious drumming passages of Neil Peart in this one represents the desire to escape the uninspiring sterility of social norms. Of course, lyrically, this song describes those societal pressures to conform, be cool or be cast out, and particularly the suffocating sterility of the suburban housing. The suburbs are represented as quite a lonely place, especially for the misfit. Those that do not conform, a perfect petri dish for youthful alienation. Certainly Rush's heavy rock feel is dampened down and diluted by the heavy use of synthesizers on this record, shifting the emphasis away from Lifeson's guitars. But a fascinating song about alienation, which alienated a lot of their core fan base. Nevertheless, despite the frosty reception it received from many fans, it did actually perform well, charting at number 8 in the USA. Anyway, we've been watching a video by Classic Album Review. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please do share it, like, subscribe, check that notification bell, do all that stuff. And check some of the links below the video for ways you can support the sterling work done at this channel. It's always much appreciated. Anyway, I'll leave you with my closing salvo, which is hope you're well, staying safe, and of course that you keep listening.